There is a moment right before a genius speaks, when he chooses not to. And in that single second of silence, he becomes more powerful than every person in the room who could not stop talking. Most people will never understand this. They will spend their entire lives believing that the loudest voice wins, that the quickest reply proves intelligence, that silence is empty space waiting to be filled. But somewhere, quietly, the most brilliant minds in history knew a secret the rest of the world was never taught. They knew that the tongue reveals what the mind has not yet finished thinking. They knew that every unnecessary word is a door left open for someone else to walk through and take something from you. So they closed that door, again and again, until silence became their weapon. Why do the smartest people you know say the least in a room full of noise? Why did the men who built empires, ended wars, and changed the course of history choose restraint over reaction, patience over proof, stillness over the desperate need to be heard? What if everything you were taught about confidence was incomplete, and the real power was never in what you say, but in what you refuse to say? Stay with this, because by the time this ends, you will never look at silence the same way again. We live in a world addicted to noise. Every app on your phone is quietly begging you to react, to comment, to defend yourself, to prove you are right before someone else does it first. Social media has turned silence into suspicion. If you don't respond immediately, people assume you're weak, absent, or afraid. Modern culture has convinced an entire generation that value is measured in volume. Speak more, post more, argue more, justify more. And somewhere in that endless noise, something ancient and essential has been quietly buried. Because the truth is, history's wisest men rarely spoke without reason. They didn't chase arguments. They didn't need the last word. They understood something that most of us are only now beginning to rediscover, that in a world obsessed with speaking, the ability to stay silent has become one of the rarest and most transformative forms of power a human being can possess. By the end of this, you will understand why that is true. You will understand how silence sharpens the mind, protects the heart, and quietly reshapes the way people see you. Not as someone who has nothing to say, but as someone who has mastered the discipline of knowing when saying nothing says everything. Let's start with a question most people never ask themselves. Why do you feel the urge to respond the instant someone insults you, doubts you, or challenges you? That urge is not intelligence. It is instinct. It is the oldest part of your brain, the part built for survival thousands of years ago, screaming that you are under attack and must defend yourself immediately. But here is what almost nobody tells you. Every time you obey that urge without thinking, you hand your power to the very person who provoked you. Marcus Aurelius, the most powerful man in the Roman Empire, understood this better than anyone in history. He had the authority to silence any voice that opposed him. And yet, in his private writings, the ones he never intended the world to read, he kept reminding himself of one thing, that he could not control what others said or did, only how he chose to respond. He wrote that a man is not disturbed by events themselves, but by the judgments he attaches to them. Think about what that means. The insult that ruins your entire day has no power on its own. It only gains power the moment you decide to react to it. Marcus Aurelius ruled the most powerful empire on earth, and yet his greatest battles were fought silently, inside his own mind, long before any words ever left his mouth. This is where most people get it wrong. They believe silence means weakness, that the person who stays quiet during conflict is the one who lost. But watch closely the next time you see two people arguing. Watch who is exhausted, defensive, repeating themselves, desperate to be understood, and watch who remains calm, measured, untouched. Ask yourself honestly which one looks more in control. Seneca, the philosopher who advised emperors and endured exile, poverty, and the constant threat of death, wrote something that should unsettle anyone addicted to arguing their point. He said that no man was ever wise by chance. Wisdom, to him, was built through discipline, especially the discipline of restraint. Seneca believed that most human suffering came not from what happened to us, but from our own uncontrolled reactions to it. He trained himself daily to pause before responding, to examine his emotions like a stranger studying a specimen rather than a man drowning in feeling. This wasn't coldness. It was mastery. And mastery, as he understood it, always begins with silence. Now think about Abraham Lincoln, a man surrounded by enemies within his own cabinet, men who mocked him, underestimated him, and openly criticized his decisions. Instead of reacting immediately to their attacks, Lincoln developed a private habit. When overwhelmed with anger, he would write a furious letter to the person who wronged him, pour every ounce of frustration onto the page, and then never send it. He allowed the emotion to exist, to be fully felt, without ever letting it control his actions. That single habit reveals a level of emotional intelligence most people never develop in an entire lifetime. Lincoln didn't suppress his anger. He simply refused to let it speak for him. This is the first shift you need to understand. Silence is not the absence of emotion. It is the presence of control. And this leads to something most people have never considered. The reason talkative people often feel more anxious, more insecure, and more exhausted than those who speak less. Psychologists have long observed a pattern. People with a strong need for external validation tend to talk more, interrupt more, and explain themselves more, because their sense of self-worth depends on being seen, agreed with, and understood by others in real time. Every unanswered comment feels like a threat to their identity. But people who have built genuine inner confidence don't feel that same pressure. They don't need to win every conversation, because their sense of self isn't sitting on the outcome of that conversation. Their silence isn't empty, it's secure. Epictetus, a man born into slavery who later became one of history's most respected philosophers, taught something radical for his time: that freedom has nothing to do with your circumstances, and everything to do with your reactions. He believed that most people were enslaved not by other people, but by their own uncontrolled impulses, especially the impulse to speak before thinking. He taught his students to ask one simple question before reacting to anything. Is this within my control? If someone insults you, their words are not within your control, but your response is entirely yours. The moment you understand that distinction, silence stops feeling like restraint and starts feeling like freedom. Here is where everything you thought you understood about power needs to be reconsidered. You were taught that power looks loud, that power interrupts, argues, proves, defends, and never lets an insult go unanswered. But that is not power, that is fear wearing the costume of confidence. Real power doesn't need an audience. Real power doesn't need to win every exchange. Real power can sit in a room, absorb an insult, feel the sting of it fully, and choose, not from weakness but from strength, to say nothing at all. This is the twist that changes everything. Silence was never the opposite of strength. It has always been one of the purest expressions of it. Think about Warren Buffett, a man who could dominate any financial conversation with sheer intelligence, yet is famous for sitting quietly in meetings, listening far more than he speaks, allowing others to reveal their thinking before he ever reveals his own. His silence isn't passive. It's strategic. Every word he eventually says carries more weight precisely because he didn't waste 100 words getting there. In a world where everyone is rushing to speak first, the ones who listen longest often see what everyone else missed. Nelson Mandela spent 27 years in a small prison cell, enduring conditions designed to break him mentally and emotionally. If anyone had the right to walk out consumed by rage, ready to unleash decades of justified anger through every word he spoke, it was him. Instead, when he emerged, he chose reconciliation over retaliation. He chose measured words over explosive ones. Historians and biographers have described how, during tense negotiations, Mandela would sit in complete silence while others raged around him, absorbing the room, thinking 3 steps ahead, refusing to let one impulsive sentence undo decades of strategic patience. That silence didn't come from having nothing to say. It came from understanding that some words, once spoken, can never be taken back, and a nation's future was worth more than a moment of emotional release. And think of Steve Jobs, a man known for his intensity, yet also known for something people rarely discuss: his ability to sit in silence during a meeting, staring at an idea, refusing to speak until he had fully understood it, letting the discomfort of silence pressure everyone else in the room to think harder. He used silence as a tool to extract clarity, both from himself and from others. In a culture obsessed with quick answers, he understood that the most valuable ideas often arrive only after the noise has stopped. Now picture two versions of yourself. One version reacts to everything. Every message demands an immediate reply. Every disagreement becomes a battle that must be won before the day ends. Every insult burns until it's answered. This version of you is exhausting to be, because your peace depends entirely on what other people do or say. You are a passenger in your own emotional life, reacting instead of choosing, speaking instead of thinking, constantly proving instead of quietly knowing. Now picture the other version. This version pauses. This version listens fully before responding, feels the sting of an insult without needing to return it, sits with uncertainty without rushing to fill it with words. This version isn't cold or distant. This version is free. Free from the exhausting need to control what others think. Free from the compulsion to win every conversation. Free to think clearly, decide wisely, and speak only when words will actually matter. This is not about becoming quiet all the time. This is not about suppressing your voice or hiding your opinions. This is about understanding that every word you speak is a form of currency, and the person who spends it carelessly will always have less influence than the person who spends it wisely. Silence, used correctly, is not withdrawal from the world. It is preparation to enter it with far greater precision. Think about how differently your life might unfold if you stopped needing to respond to every provocation. Think about the arguments you never would have had, the energy you never would have wasted, the respect you would have quietly earned simply by being the person in the room who didn't need to prove anything. Think about how much clearer your decisions would become if you gave your mind the space to think before your mouth rushed to speak. This is not a small shift. This is the difference between reacting to your life and actually leading it. The people who built empires, endured suffering with dignity, and changed history were not the loudest voices in the room. They were the ones who understood timing, the ones who knew that a single well-placed sentence, spoken after real thought, carries more power than 1,000 words thrown out in the heat of the moment. They understood that silence, held with intention, is not empty. It is loaded with everything you chose not to say, ready to be used exactly when it matters most. So the next time someone tries to provoke you into an argument you don't need to have, remember Marcus Aurelius choosing his response instead of reacting to the offense. The next time you feel the urge to defend yourself against every small criticism, remember Seneca training himself daily to master his own reactions before the world ever tested them. The next time silence feels uncomfortable, remember that discomfort is often the exact moment growth is happening. You do not need to explain yourself to everyone. You do not need to win every conversation to prove your worth. You do not need to fill every silence with noise just because the world around you is afraid of stillness. The strongest people you will ever meet are not the ones who speak the most. They are the ones who have mastered the space between a thought and a word, and use that space to think, to choose, and to become someone far more powerful than the noise around them. Silence is not the sound of nothing. It is the sound of someone becoming unshakable. So here is the only question that matters now. The next time your pride demands a response, will you speak to be heard, or will you stay silent to be understood?